All right, so we've been looking at some pretty intense stuff lately, right? All that energy under the Earth's crust and how it shakes things up.
Yeah, tell me about it. Fascinating stuff, but I think it's time we come back up to the surface for a bit.
Exactly, up to where we can actually, feel the changes a bit more directly.
Yeah, where the wind blows and the rain falls, and sometimes it does a bit more than just glow and fall.
That is the perfect segue because today we're diving into weather hazards,
Ah, yes, those forces of nature that can really make things interesting.
especially here in the UK, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about hurricanes or tornadoes, but
Yeah.
we've got our own set of challenges.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who's maybe getting ready for their GCSEs, this is all super relevant.
For sure. So before we get into specifics, let's make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, good idea.
What exactly are we talking about when we say weather hazard?
Okay, so in the simplest terms, a weather hazard is basically when normal weather, the kind we see every day, goes a bit extreme.
Okay, so it's not just a bit of rain. It's got to be more than that.
Right. It's when the wind gets so strong it can cause damage, or when there's so much rain that it leads to flooding.
Or even when it gets way too hot or way too cold for a long time.
Exactly. Those extremes are what make it hazardous. They have the potential to harm people, damage buildings, and disrupt the environment.
Got it. So thinking about the UK specifically, what kinds of weather hazards should we be aware of?
Well, we get a fair share of storms, that's for sure, and those are more than just a little bit of wind and rain.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some trees come down after a particularly bad storm.
Exactly. We can get gusts of wind over 70 miles per hour, sometimes strong enough to damage buildings and bring down power lines.
And then there's the rain that comes with those
Oh,
storms.
yeah, the torrential downpours that can lead to some serious flooding.
Flooding, that's another big one, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you get that much rain in a short amount of time, the ground just can't absorb it all.
Especially in cities with all that concrete.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It just runs off and overwhelms the drainage systems. And before you know it, you've got flooded streets and homes.
And it's not just heavy rain that causes sledding, right?
No, you're right. We also have to think about coastal flooding, especially with rising sea levels and storm surges.
Okay, so we've got storms and flooding. What else?
Well, on the other end of the spectrum, we've got heat waves.
Ah, yes. Those stretches of scorching hot days.
Yep. And while some people might enjoy the sunshine, those prolonged periods of high temperatures can be really dangerous, especially for vulnerable people.
Heat stroke dehydration. It can be a real problem.
And don't forget about the impact on infrastructure, too. Heat can buckle roads and railway lines, causing all sorts of disruption.
Right. And then on the flip side, we've got the cold snaps.
Yeah, those prolonged periods of freezing temperatures when everything's covered in snow and ice.
It might seem kind of fun at first, but those conditions can be pretty hazardous too.
Oh, absolutely. Travel becomes a nightmare with slippery roads and canceled trains, and there's always the risk of pipes freezing and bursting.
So we've got storms, flooding heat waves, and cold snaps, all of which can cause some serious disruption here in the UK.
Definitely. And the thing is, these aren't just one-off events. They're part of our climate, and there's something we need to be prepared for.
That's a good point. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay, sure.
We've talked about all these different weather hazards, but what can we actually do about them? What measures can be put in place to reduce their impact?
Hmm. That's a great question, and it's something that really needs to be addressed at both a local and national level.
Exactly. So as you go about your day-to-day lives, maybe take a look around your community and see what's being done and what could be done better.
Because ultimately, we all have a role to play in preparing for and mitigating these weather hazards.
Absolutely. Well, this has been another fascinating deep dive. Thanks for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about the power of nature and how it shapes our world.
Until next time, folks, stay curious and stay safe.